Kia ora, I'm David Chaston with 90 at 9, brought to you by interest.co.nz. This week, get everything you need to know in 90 seconds at 9 o'clock with news. Central banks around the world are racing to raise rates in a concerted effort to squash inflation. The cost may be growth and jobs, but there seems universal agreement rampant inflation is a bigger long-term risk. But first, US jobless claims rose last week to 178,000, but this level is still very low by historic standards. It is no indication their tight labour market is easing. There are now less than 1.3 million people on these benefits, and the insured jobless rate is a tiny 0.9%. And the US current account deficit for the second quarter of 2022 came in pretty much as expected, with a $250 billion deficit. This isn't good, and these huge quarterly deficits started in 2020 and haven't let up. Disastrous policymaking is behind the ugly trend, and although the second quarter of 2022 was an improvement on the first quarter, it still came in at 4% of US GDP. Recovery from mad policy isn't easy, as they're finding out. New Zealand's current account deficit is at 2.7% of GDP, and that isn't good either. And the Bank of Japan met yesterday and held its ultra-loose monetary policies, but the Japanese government had to intervene to support the yen for the first time since 1998, after the currency extended losses to a fresh 24-year lows. And the Taiwanese central bank also met and raised its policy rate to 1.625% from 1.5%. It was a modest rise in the face of slowing economic expansion there. And Indonesia raised its policy rate by 0.5% yesterday, and they're starting to experience inflation at too high levels for them, and they're now running at 6%. That took their policy rate up to 4.25%. And Norway also raised its policy rate by 50 basis points to 2.25%. They're having an inflation rate running there at 6.5%. Switzerland raised theirs by 75 basis points to 0.5%, and taking them out of negative policy rate for the first time since 2015 and their highest rate since 2009. Swiss inflation is now running at 3.5%. And the Bank of England joined the queue unanimously, raising their rate by 50 basis points too to 2.25%. Their inflation rate is currently at 9.9%. And the bank also said the UK may already be in recession. Container shipping costs dived 10% in the past week alone, as demand in the sector deflates very quickly now. But the same is not true for oil tankers. The cost for them has doubled in the past month. And dry bulk cargo rates are inching higher again. The US Treasury 10-year yield starts today at 3.70% and up a huge 19 basis points from this time yesterday. This is now its highest since 2010. And the price of gold will open today at $1,672 an ounce. This is down $12 from this time yesterday. And oil prices start today up 50 cents, and they're just on $83.50 a barrel in the US, while the international Brent price is now $89.50 a barrel. And the Kiwi dollar will open today at just on 58.5 US cents, and more than 0.5 cent lower than this time yesterday. Against the Australian dollar, we're slightly softer at just on 88 Australian cents, and its lowest in 7 years. Against the euro, with little change to 59.4 euro cents. That means our trade-weighted index starts today at 68.4 and down 40 basis points. Get more news affecting the economy in New Zealand from interest.co.nz.